Hey, Bill and Rob's listeners, aren't you excited for all of the new updates over at patreon.com/Bill and Rob's? Well, if you haven't heard, we've got some updates. But don't take my word for it. Go check it out yourself at patreon.com/Bill and Rob's. Pumpkin Spice Podcast is entered into the Bill and Rob's universe. Our buddy Graham is covering more films with us. It's a lot of exciting stuff. But to entice you over the course of the next few weeks, we wanted to share some of the episodes that have been paywalled. Now, these came out almost a whole year ago, and there's plenty more in the feed. But maybe if you're on the fence, you wanted to hear some of the episodes that never made it to the public feed. Like this episode, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, that kicked off our Planet of the Apes series back in March of 2023. Very exciting stuff. Hope you enjoy. Patreon.com/Bill and Rob's.
Welcome to Bill and Rob's, an excellent adventure. I'm Bill Tilley.
And I am Rob Schulte. Bill, back at it again. New season, same hosts.
Well, you know, luckily we don't suffer from that whole recasting thing that Hollywood has to deal with on the big time, because it's just you and me, Rob. We are the pair that makes this happen.
It is the pair, the banana that makes it happen. The chocolate chip cookie that makes it happen.
You are the rope, and I am the tire that is attached to the tree of podcasting.
I think you've got a point there. But, Bill, we're going ape, man.
We are.
I hinted at it enough, and I don't know if I would really call them hints as much as me just laying the foundation for a series I eventually wanted to do on here.
I would call it the least subliminal campaign for a series of our podcast that I've ever been privy to. But hey, it worked. You got it. You got what you wanted. I am happy for you, and I am happy to be part of this.
It's truly a terrific, terrific time. So we are doing Planet of the Apes. We're going to do all of the Planet of the Apes movies. Maybe all of them. We're going to do... There's one in particular you and I are still kind of like wishy-washy about. Not sure where the Tim Burton one falls in any of this. But we were looking through it, and we had this fun thing back with the Predator series of going chronologically, or at least attempting, if there were a chronological way to bridge the newer Planet of the Apes movies with the older ones. Does it work? I haven't seen all of Planet of the Apes movies. I will be watching the newest ones that came out over the last 10 years for the first time for this podcast. I have no idea what any of them are about.
Wow.
But it does seem to me on paper that, well, if one came out in 2011 and is set in present day and it has the first smart chimp, that seems like a prequel.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're going with. There, we get James Franco's Planet of the Apes movies, and then we move into Chuck Heston's.
Well, that is a segue that you probably never thought you were going to say at any time in your life, but here we are. Yes, we're going from Franco to Heston, with a few stops in between with some people that are really going to light up the screen when we get to a couple more of these other newer Apes movies. So I'm looking forward to your reaction to these.
Oh, wow. Okay. Say no more, Monet Moore. Bill, we are watching 2011's Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Let's give them the back of the box rundown of this movie so that they can follow along with our sometimes lucid thoughts.
Yes, good call. Okay, so there's a monkey on my back of the VHS box.
Oh, I love that so much.
So here we go. Rise of the Planet of the Apes is a revolution an action-packed epic featuring stunning visual effects and creatures unlike anything ever seen before. At the story's heart is Caesar, a chimpanzee who gains human-like intelligence and emotions from an experimental drug. Raised like a child by the drug's creator, Caesar ultimately finds himself taken from the humans he loves and imprisoned. Seeking justice, Caesar assembles a simian army and escapes, putting man and primate on a collision course that could change the planet forever. Now, Bill, I also wanted to know, because this is something interesting. We like to read the back of the box, but like the back of the box sensationalizes a lot and is usually longer than a streaming description. And I went and looked up just what it says for streaming descriptions on Plex. And it says, a highly intelligent chimpanzee named Caesar has been living a peaceful suburban life ever since he was born. But when he gets taken to a cruel primate facility, Caesar decides to revolt against those who have harmed him.
That's really interesting. It kind of shows you the way things have changed, because the back of the box many moons ago, especially back in the 80s and 90s, was a vital part of the marketing for that movie, because there were still video stores and you would read the back of that box and it had to hook you. The streaming one has to be shorter because it's on your TV, so you're panning and scanning.
Like real estate wise, yeah.
Yeah, it is. And to me, that makes me think of you're shooting more of a TV Guide synopsis paragraph, but you lose a lot of context in just a few short words. And that streaming description makes this movie sound a lot more like a kind of just your standard Black Beauty animal type movie that you have a beloved pet or something like that gets taken away by accident or lost.
Yeah.
It definitely goes to show you, dear friends, be careful about that streaming description. It might lead you in a path that you might not like. Maybe that's not what you're looking for, and you really want an Apes take over and try to put everybody in their place kind of thing, which is actually why we're doing this podcast, to shine a light on some of these things that you might have missed. So good on the VHS back of the box, and not so great on you, streaming description. I could do without you.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It is an interesting look at how we choose what to watch. But, you know, if you've got thoughts on that, everyone, please tweet at us, Bill and Robs, at Bill and Robs, Instagram, Twitter. Reach out to us on social media. Let's just put it that way, okay?
I like that, because who knows what variously odd name platforms of electronic minutia you'll be firing these thoughts at us in the coming days, because much like the Planet of the Apes, we are in a bit of a social media Planet of the Apes environment right now. But it's out there, so you can find us. We're not hard to find, and we actually would love to hear from you.
So, Bill, you want to run us through some of the cast of this?
Absolutely. So in this movie, we have James Franco as Will Rodman, the main human protagonist of this movie. We have Andy Serkis, who plays Caesar, who actually plays this part in the movie. He is the lead chimpanzee. We have Frida Pinto as Carolyn Arana, I believe. I hope I'm saying that right, because I don't think they ever say her last name in the movie at all. But that's as close as I can get to it. And we have the amazing John Lithgow as Charles Rodman, who plays Will Rodman's father in this movie. We have Brian Cox. You might not know that name, but trust me, you'll know him when you see him on screen.
I am sure every listener here probably knows a little bit of Mr. Cox.
Yes. He is John Landon, the head of the primate facility. We have Tom Felton as his son, Dodge Landon, who is a helper there, who is quite the character. We will get to him. David Oyelowo as Stephen Jacobs, Tyler Labine as Robert Franklin, David Hewlett as Hunsaker. Please keep that name in mind. He is a character in this movie we will also get to. This movie was directed by Rupert Wyatt, and its writers were Rick Jaffa, his wife Amanda Silver, and Pierre Boulez.
Yeah, Rupert made some bold choices. Hey, maybe Rick and Amanda and Pierre did too, because what's the gray area between what was in the script and what was in this movie? I want to talk generally about the movie before we go into our segments. Bill, I love the idea of a Planet of the Apes movie. I think they're fun. I think it's a ridiculous concept. I think of things like Every Which Way But Loose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think of this sort of stuff. It's of a different era. Planet of the Apes was great. Everyone kind of knows the spoiler at this point. But if not, I'm not going to say it, but it is one of those things where it's been moved into like the common ether of television jokes, spin-offs, tropes, things like that. But to imagine someone's going to be like, you know what, I'm going to reboot Planet of the Apes and I'm going to kind of make it a prequel. Seems like you would have to have a fucking amazing idea. And, I don't want to jump to the end too much, but I feel like this one could have had a few more rounds of punch-ups.
Yeah, I think they definitely needed a couple of trips back around the writer's table on a few things. But I agree with you, Rob. To look at the original Planet of the Apes, we pick up, as the apes have already risen. So there's a lot of meat on the bone of that story, prequel-wise, on that subject, which I think is great. Normally, I'm not a prequel person, but when you have a story that has had drastic change happen before, then yeah, going back and taking a look at how that could happen could be interesting. It also could get very hack very quick. So, and you're right, because apes and primates, especially in television and movies, often they're the buddies. You've got your Clyde from Any Which Way But Loose. I grew up watching BJ and the Bear. Bear was a chimpanzee that ran around with his trucker buddy BJ, and they hauled freight, and they're always cute and cuddly and they're smart. They're often your friends. And I think it's probably because we can empathize with them. They have characteristics, they'll dress up in clothes, they have expressions we recognize, but by and large, you never thought of them as an antagonist, as somebody to compete against or something that would rise up against humans as to square off in a way. So because they are so much like humans in what they can do and how they act and how they're shaped, is the idea that they would rise up and take us on is a frightening thought. It is a very scary thing. It's not just a humorous idea that you throw out there. It's really kind of terrifying if you put it in the right context. And I think this movie does some of that and falls flat on some of that as well. So like you, I don't want to jump to the end on that. So we'll let that one be till we get a little farther down the road. But I do know that the writers of this movie and the director both consider this more of a reinvention of the thought, which is probably good. They weren't trying to get to where we left off. They actually just tied into some of the thoughts about how this could happen.
Yeah.
And I think that served them in a lot of ways for the concept of the story. So it sets it outside the Heston movies in a bit, but it's in the spirit of that. And they all had a great reverence for that from what I could tell from the things I read. And I think that's a good sign.
Yeah.
For somebody who's going to come back and play in a franchise sandbox that is as well known and in a lot of ways probably as well loved as Planet of the Apes is.
Yeah. And I think just to give people a little bit broader of an overview from the back of the box, essentially in this movie, James Franco is working on an Alzheimer's drug, like a drug to cure Alzheimer's, right? And of course, they're testing on animals, chimpanzees, close to human DNA. They give you some Hollywood jargon to try and make it work. And it does. Everything seems like it's working just fine. There's a problem. They have to put down a lot of the apes. James Franco keeps one of the baby apes who was born during the malfunction. The drugs were put in this ape Caesar's mother. The mother has him, so it's kind of already born into his DNA. So he's growing up with like a higher intelligence. Bad things happen. The ape gets loose at one point, beats this one guy up, bites his finger off. He has to go to a sanctuary. And then at the sanctuary, he's not treated well. Caesar is not treated well at all. And then gets all the apes on his side, releases the drug on them. And then all of the apes battle against humans and find their freedom at the end. We will talk more specifically later. This is not a scene-by-scene movie, or this is not a scene-by-scene podcast, but I do think that it is going forward. We're going to need to give you guys a little bit more broad strokes than the back of the box because things are going to get probably confusing pretty quickly, I am assuming.
Yeah. confusing and perplexing.
Yes.
Also, once we get to certain scenes of this movie.
And before we get into our first segment, the last thing I want to say about my general thoughts on this is, did you feel like they were beating a dead banana, Bill, in this one and letting us know, like, this ape is smart and this ape is smart. And now we've got the baby ape who's also smart, and that ape grows up. And now that ape is in captivity and is smart and is dealing with this. And it's like, I think a lot of that fat could have been trimmed in the first hour of this movie.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are a lot of those moments and a lot of how we get to where we are parts of this movie.
Yeah.
That could have gone by the wayside and really tightened up this story, because it would have cut out a lot of the decisions and a lot of the thinking of this plot that make absolutely no sense. It is really swinging from the wrong vine in a lot of places in the decisions that it makes, which I am sure we are about to get to.
Bill, so why don't we head into our first segment of this new season, which we're calling Evolutionary Studies.
I like that title, and not just because I thought of it.
It can be both.
Yeah, well, a little bit. So this is the part where we discuss any interesting, fun, shocking facts, trivia, bits of information we picked up when we looked into how and why this movie was made. So, Rob, do you have a bit of evolutionary studies you can kick us off with for this new season?
Yes, and I think we should go every other. So I'll do one, you can do one, and we'll go ping pong back and forth. How about that?
Now, see, you're already bolstering a level of cooperation that is going to help us avoid the ape's future. Yes, Rob has extended his hand, which I am now patting, and you'll find out a little bit more about that when you see this video, which we will release pay-per-view.
So, Bill, I found it interesting that good old Chuck Heston made his 5th appearance in an Apes movie by being on the TV in the ape prison. Yeah.
What? Oh, okay. That makes sense, because I remember when this movie was filmed, I'm like, I don't think I remember seeing him in there anywhere, but
yeah,
holy cow.
Yeah.
There's something I missed, because I do know this movie's filled with Easter eggs, because apparently the writers and directors loved the movies and they liked putting them in there, but they actually did it really subtle in a lot of ways. So those things were hard to pick. I did not know that. I knew there was a movie playing, but I did not see him on the screen.
Yeah, I didn't. I had to go back once I looked up this fact, and I'm like, oh, look at that. It's probably like Soylent Green or something.
So he's like the R2-D2 of the Apes movies, where everybody just wants to stick R2-D2 in all their science fiction things, just like him floating by in Star Trek 09.
Yeah, or like on the alien ship or the Predator ship or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Well, good on him. I'm glad that Chuck made it into there. It is, I mean, it's kind of his movies, even though he is definitely not in all of them in a lot of significant ways.
His character, I think, is, but not him as an actor. Or maybe it's his brother or a different astronaut or something. Anyway, we'll get to those movies down the line, just weeks ahead. Bill, what's one of the studies you have found?
So I found out every ape in this movie, every primate, is computer generated. Every single one of them. This movie has no animals, no trained animals, no any of that. The filmmakers actually thought, after they were thinking about how this movie was going to be made, they saw the hypocrisy of making a movie where apes rise up against their human enslavers, keepers for a better word, and using that to make that movie. So the technology had advanced to the point where they were like, nope, we're going to do it this way. And that's how they got Andy Serkis, and every ape in this movie has an actor behind it in a motion capture suit.
Oh, that's cool.
It really comes through. I mean, it looks like people or creatures, that living things moving around in this movie. And it actually was a landmark event, because some of this technology is from Avatar, apparently, from that filming. But when they did that, they had to do it in studios because that controlled the environment. But they figured out at this point how to do motion capture out on set or in the wild or on location. So that opened up the entire idea of taking these things like to the park where they go, or when they go to the building, the actors could go there and do their bits and then have the CGI laid over top of them and create those characters. So that is an amazing piece of technology that I'm reaping the benefits of today, and in some ways reaping the downside of it in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like there's definitely, I mean, this is 2011 and there are definitely, you know, it's over 10 years ago, and you can see like Nope came out recently that had a CGI chimpanzee in it.
Oh.
Jordan Peele's movie. And the difference between that CGI chimpanzee and these CGI chimpanzees is like Nintendo to PlayStation 5. It's wild.
I want to see that now, because having watched this movie again for our podcast, one of the things that struck me was I remember thinking in the movie theater, it was fairly impressive what we were seeing.
Sure.
And I think the movie theater, it's not that it plays a trick on you, but there is a big difference between the theater and home.
Oh, yeah.
I think home lets you concentrate more because everything's brought down to a smaller size.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you're super rich and you have a 120-foot television in your living room, which you and I do not as of yet. Come on, everybody. Let's share the show. Get those links out there.
Please.
But it was good. But from the get-go, I fell right into that uncanny valley of, I know this is CGI. I mean, I knew it anyway.
Yeah.
But it is very good, but there's still a big level of unrealness to all the apes in this movie. And I think it's weird because there's one thing you can do that draws me out of the movie, which is there's a scene at the very beginning where the apes are being chased and they're being caught by hunters. Mm-hmm. And they'll do a camera move that's not possible in real life. Like the camera sits right in front of a running chimpanzee, and you couldn't ever do that in real life. And when you do a camera angle that can't happen, my brain registers it and goes, that's not real. But everything else where they're moving around and just going side to side in ways, that kind of blends it back in. So they did a really good job. It's clearly leaps and bounds ahead of a lot of things you would see in other movies, but it's still, even for the day, it's a little unsettling, especially when they zoom in. Anytime they ever zoom in on the chimpanzee, which they do want to do. I think some of these people must have gone to work for Star Trek Discovery, because they have a thing for eyeballs. They want to get super close on that eyeball, and it's just too much for me to watch it that way. But it really is impressive, even if every once in a while it just jerks you right out of the movie.
Totally. Speaking of motion capture suits, Circus did base his Caesar character on a famous chimp named Oliver, who walked upright and wore pants.
What?
For a while, apparently people thought he was the elusive missing link. We all know evolutionary studies have grown past the idea of a missing link these days, but I love the idea of being like, this monkey wears pants. He's almost us.
That's an interesting bit. I did not know that there was such a creature. Rob, there's a question. Was there ever a point where you would realize that Andy Serkis's Caesar at this entire movie is wearing pants? Like, was it obvious to you? Because it wasn't to me, because I don't know, because his pants are so dark, they blend in with his fur.
Well, it was to me because I was like, oh, he's got a pants and shirt on, like, especially when they start introducing more apes. I was like, to differentiate Caesar, even though they don't need to really differentiate him. I think he's always wearing pants. But then it's like he's also got a scar on his chest. And it's like they've got all of these things that they're like, well, just in case people can't recognize this monkey's face, even though every monkey has a very distinct look. Every ape, yes, I should say, has a very distinct look. It feels like they were like double downing on like, we got to make sure, like, okay, he's wearing a shirt here. So when the shirt gets ripped off, like, he's got a scar. But, you know, if we're still confused when there's a bunch of them, he's got pants on, you know.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense, because when he wears a red shirt in the movie.
Yeah.
And when he loses it, it's pretty dramatic. And I don't know why. Maybe it was just my television, but it was so dark that every once in a while I had to look and go, oh, yeah, he's wearing, I don't know what kind of pants these are.
Dungarees, I think.
Bro, let's go with dungarees. But also, every time it popped in, I would have this thought of, at the end of the day, this is still supposed to be a animal from the animal kingdom. Now he's evolving due to human science getting a fluid in him that makes him super smart. But even before that, as he's growing up, I'm thinking, pants on a primate seems very impractical.
And seems like a very good band name.
And now you've made me reverse my entire feeling about how I feel about Pants on a Primate. So yeah, I think that makes a great band or an album for sure. But I thought, boy, just teaching a chimpanzee to wear these pants, and, animals that like us, we all have to go to the loo every once in a while. I hope you taught him everything he needs to know about getting those pants off.
Oh, he's a smart one. He's got it.
They have to be dungarees because they take all kinds of abuse.
It's true. Well, Bill, we could talk about Pants on a Primate till the cows come home.
Whoa, that's a different franchise.
Yeah. Why don't you give me your last evolutionary study?
So there is the facility in this movie is the San Bruno primate facility. Mm. And apparently this is a place where they keep primates in this movie. It shows up in the movie. This is where they take Caesar after he has his incident with the neighbor. It's basically ape jail. Kind of like it would be the dog kennel, but it's full of, and it is full of primates. There's what seems like hundreds of apes and chimps and everything in this place. And I'm watching this and I'm going, why? How could this place exist? Like, I get that they're testing on chimpanzees in medical labs, so I'm sure they're there, but you think they keep them on the premises. But here's this place.
But even within like the story of this movie.
Yeah. This is an insane amount of apes to have in one place. It's just crazy. Like, this almost seems ridiculous, but I looked into it, and apparently at the time this movie was made in 2011, there were about 3,000 apes labs like this in the country.
Whoa.
Like, I don't know that they looked like San Bruno, because San Bruno looks like a prison.
Yeah, sounds like a prison.
Yeah, and I know it's modeled after a real place, but I have to believe that, it's not as dingy and terrible as it is in this movie because, of course, dramatic effect. But apparently, these places exist and had somewhere between 70 and 80 apes apiece. So guess what, everybody? What happens in this movie theoretically could happen. That was a little bit shocking, and it kind of made me feel better about it after I watched it, that it's like, well, okay, at least these places do exist, and it's not just some crazy prison concept that they cooked up for no reason other than to make everybody scared.
And get us a bunch of apes on a bridge.
A lot of apes and a very big bridge.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue to bridge the gap from our first segment to our next segment, Oohs and Ahs, or should I say, Ooh-Oohs and Ah-Ahs.
Ting tang walla walla bing bang.
Bill, tell us about it.
Well, this is the segment where we go over some things that we liked or found amusing about that movie. This is the positive part where we look for the fun in everything that we watch. So I think I'm going to go first on this one, Rob, since
please do
that last one. So one of the things I found that I really liked about this movie is the ape interactions in this movie. They're really great. Of course, in the original movie, we have actors in suits who are in a lot of ways aping regular human behavior in a lot of ways. It's not so much anything to do with animalistic tendencies or animals relating to humans. It's the story, and it just happens that these talking apes are in charge. But in this movie, the interactions between the actual actors and the CGI really made a difference, because when they are together, like I'd made the point where the CGI takes me out of it when I look at the creature, but them going with each other, like Caesar and the older orangutan, Maurice, in the jail, I got real Shawshank vibes from these two. You could see the emotions and the thoughts going back and forth that felt really real. And when Caesar runs up against his nemesis in the jail, the Rocket, they have a big fight for dominance, but it also gave me real Biff and Marty vibes, because it was kind of kooky and wacky and also a bit scary, because Rocket comes off as a Biff Tannen kind of bully. He's just going to shove everybody around and get his way and give you his noogies and do his stuff. And it really brought a level to the movie that I really appreciated. It wasn't just act, reacts, monkey scream, primate screams, do this, do that. It made me kind of care, especially about what Caesar was going through and what was going on, and in his relationship to Franco, who is basically his dad, and his family is taken away from. They do. There's a real humanistic stuff here, and Franco and the director Rupert and the writers have all said, in a lot of ways, this movie is not so much an apes take over movie. It's a movie about a family, a dad who loses his son and is dealing with some stuff.
I've got thoughts on that.
And we'll get to that. But as far as that concept being back there, this particular part of it with the interactions actually plays well if you're trying to do that. Now, whether that's executed or not overall, we'll get there.
Sure.
But it was really impressive.
Oh, totally. The first one I'd like to start off with for my ooh and I thought it was amusing to see James Franco as a scientist. I think it was ridiculous. And there are areas in this movie that really, I mean, this is another ooh and ah of mine, so I'll just merge them together. Like where I felt for the apes, the CGI apes, and I think they did a good job. You know, I mean, I think it's a little easy when you see things imprisoned and stuff like that, but like, I'm glad it was cut with James Franco being a scientist, because that was so not believable to me that it was amusing and fun to watch. I really got a kick out of that, because I just couldn't watch him be a serious scientist with a monkey son, a chimpanzee adopted kid. I couldn't see it as real. It just didn't work.
No, it really comes across as almost Weekend at Bernie's type level of behavior, because Franco, he doesn't seem like a scientist, but he also doesn't seem like a particularly smart person. His decisions are strange, and he doesn't make good ones, and he reverses himself a lot. He's just a weird character in this movie. And it's like he doesn't really land any of it. So he's almost this weird chaos agent that when he comes on screen, you're just like, you expect him to just whip out a kegger or something and be like, let's get on with the party. But he just doesn't fit with the story that they're trying to tell at all. I'm with you on that one.
Well, what's another one of your likes or amusing moments for this? God, we're really digging into this one.
Well, there's a lot here, and one of those things that I really liked was the callbacks in the movie are really amusing.
Interesting.
I found them largely amusing, some not, but for the most part, this is also something we've talked about in previous series. When you do a remake, reboot, continuation, so we found this especially in our Predator series, that you can fall into that callback trap hard if you really want to, and really beat everybody over the head with it. So I think the directors have said that they tried to make the callback subtle and organic to the movie, which by and large, I think the small ones work well because they fly by really quick.
Except for the glaringly terrible one.
But at one point, Caesar's making a model of the Statue of Liberty, which you just barely see. It's just something he's got in his hands. You see the Icarus, which is the ship from the first movie, in a different way. They're just nice little things that popped up here and there. But yes, the scene in the Apes prison with Dodge, when they finally do the classic Charlton Heston "It's a Madhouse" scream, is the part where you kind of want to just get up and take a little trip down the hall and collect your thoughts and take a breath, because it is just over. It's not over the top. It goes over the top, like these monkeys go out of this prison and then keep on going.
Yeah.
That's bad, but for the most part, I like the rest of them.
Well, that's fair. Well, Bill, I think like our last amusing moment, now this isn't to say who our favorite moment was or our favorite chimp, but like I think you and I can both agree that like the battle on the Golden Gate Bridge, and I don't want to give too much away because this is probably one of the coolest parts of the film. It's on both of our lists. Like we both really think it was executed well, and they use one of the scenes in the trailer. I remember it to this day, and it's like when a gorilla jumps at a helicopter, and it's great, and it's another scene that makes me go, oh. But I'm glad that we both had that on our list. I thought that was pretty cool.
It is really great. It's everything you want in a movie moment. Logic takes a backseat in a couple of spots, but the thing moves so fast that you're just caught up in it. So the things that clang a bit about why would they not use these kind of weapons, or why would they have this thought that they could block off a bridge that's filled with orangutans and chimpanzees who know how to climb over things.
Yep.
Watching the humans in their first real grapple with trying to contain these now super smart simians is really amazing. And they make great use of this whole thing. And it's a great setting. It's real kind of 300 type of vibes. There's a lot of action to it. And side note on that, it turns out this battle on the bridge, they actually built a 400-foot section of this bridge as a set to shoot on. So it looks great. It looks absolutely great. It is by far the shining jewel of this movie. It is top banana in set pieces.
Well, Bill, before we move on to our next segment, got to tell me real quick, who's your champ chimp?
Oh, that is easy. That would be Koba. Now, Koba is a chimp that shows up about 3/4 of the way through the movie, and he is basically the grizzled old chip on his shoulder chimpanzee. And he went from the moment even before he gets his super serum, he looks like he's really not happy with you or anybody around you. And you can tell he is going to be trouble, and he does not disappoint, but he does it in a real kind of Clint Eastwood, Gran Torino kind of way. Like you don't like him at the start, but he has a couple of moments where you're like, I get where you're going. And he actually has a showdown with the head of the super serum company, chairman of the board. That is really an epic moment. And I'm realizing we don't want to get too specific on the points of this movie because you really want to watch it, but he is stunning. And he's a badass. He's a badass chimpanzee, and you don't want to mess with him. And he makes you think, I kind of wonder he's going to be a factor going down the road big time. So Koba is my man. Or actually, Koba is my chimpanzee.
Yeah, your chimpan.
Yeah, he's my champ chimp.
Champ chimp. Mine's just that orangutan that was from the circus. Good to have a friend in prison.
Good old Maurice. He is great, isn't he?
Yeah, Maurice. That was great. Well, Bill, you know what else is great? Our next segment. Probably my favorite segue sound there. Bill, I'll go first this time because this segment is called Driving Us Bananas, which dislikes or just silly things from the film. First on my list was you have John Lithgow and Brian Cox in this movie, and they aren't the main characters of the film. You have so much talent here, and James Franco is your scientist lead.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Flip that script and make John Lithgow the scientist. Get Franco out of here immediately.
And if you want to have the Alzheimer's thing going into it, then he could be early onset or have a family member himself. But come on. Brian Cox is fine as he's not fine. I don't think it works well having him be the warden of chimp jail. But
no.
What if it was John Lithgow and Brian Cox both as scientists trying to come up with this?
Yeah.
That would be great. You could still have the dude who has all the money, who owns the businessman, but come on.
Yeah, or make Brian Cox the head of the company and Lithgow the scientist and have them butt heads because Cox is great, but I really couldn't tell whether sometimes he was just indifferent or just a real jerk from the way he played his character. It was kind of a waste in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah. Both of them. You get Lithgow tinkling the ivories on a piano and, I'm bumbling, my memory's gone, but you don't get anything else. You get him when his memory comes back, but you're not showcasing a Lithgow in this movie. It could have been anyone. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
For either role.
I agree totally.
What about you? What drove you bananas?
Why do these people build these super labs out of glass walls that aren't tempered with no security? Everything in this movie is made of glass. These apes go through so much glass and they just destroy it. They have the lab 15 feet away. This is the Predator problem all over again. Why? Why would you do this? It just infuriates me every time I see it. This is not a thing that should ever happen. Please tell me these labs aren't made this way. This is how you make an insurance company lobby. This is not how you make the lab where you're making super serum to solve the world's problems.
Well, and this is one of those things that like really is a problem with this movie. Like, you can't tell me that all of these apes are going to be jumping through glass windows on the perimeter of the building. Like, sure, maybe the glass is less than in the cages, whatever you want to suspend your disbelief for, but the perimeter of a building, like, it's not like a human could even throw a chair at a glass in an office building and bust it, but like these chimpanzees can just run and jump through it. Like, if you're not thinking about that when making this movie, because it doesn't even look that great stylistically, you know?
No, it doesn't.
So if you're not even doing that, then where's our thought process going in this movie? So yeah. I'm right there with you. The only other thing I'm going to say that drove me bananas, Bill, is that the neighbor is, I mean, there's a lot of things that drove me bananas in this movie.
You and me both.
But like, for the sake of time, I'm just going to say that like, and that neighbor is just an asshole.
Yes.
Like the neighbor, he's just an asshole, a get off my lawn guy. I don't know if we're supposed to, like, there was no humanizing him at all. So when he gets the virus at the end, oh yeah, there's a virus, everyone. We're supposed to be like, oh shit. But he's also a pilot who flies while sick. And we're like, oh, so you're just continuing to be an asshole. Like, we have no reason to like him. And he spreads the human killing disease that I assume we will be seeing in further movies.
Yeah. And that is one of the things that it drove me crazy too. And I will use that to springboard all my last points together on this one thing, because it's just, these are the moments of ridiculousness in this movie that will just pull you right out for a second and make you go, why? Because this neighbor lives next to James Franco's character and his dad. This is the guy that's going to call the cops every time you do anything wrong. So there's no way that Franco lives next door to this guy for 8 years with a stolen chimp, that he drives by his work and this guy doesn't turn him in. It's a litany of disaster. Like, he sees that his dad recovers from Alzheimer's and he keeps his mouth shut. That doesn't happen.
Nope.
James Franco's going to try and get back a chimp he stole from the company he works for through the legal system that doesn't do a background check and they don't see what's going on. It's just too much to believe at some point that the things that pop up in this movie, because they make so little sense. They are injecting apes with super serum, but yet they're using 3M painter's mask from Ace Hardware, which of course one gets knocked off of the guy who is the ape handler, who has just come back to work after an 8-year layoff with the same haircut, exactly the same. Like he was just been sitting by the phone for 8 years wondering what's going on. Who does that? Nobody does that. And then everybody who sneezes with a bloody nose, they don't test him.
Nope.
And they don't pay any attention to it. It's like a trope hurricane hits this movie and just settles over it. And you look at it and go, that's not what anybody would do at this point. Nobody seems intelligent except the apes when they get the serum. It's like you almost rooting against the humans from the get-go.
This is what I was trying to say at the beginning, where it's like, it's tongue-in-cheek when you're talking about a smart ape Planet of the Apes movie. So if you want to reboot this thing, you can't have these like silly mistakes, because it's a Planet of the Apes movie. It's going to be scrutinized for being silly, right? So it's hard to take these things serious when like these easily like get some punch-up writers in here, make sure this thing passes the test. Definitely doesn't pass the Bechdel test, but to pass any other test, you know, like make it, you have to work extra hard for a movie called Rise of the Planet of the Apes to be taken as serious as this movie wants to be taken.
Yeah, it's like you have to consult somebody. And if you had just walked into any laboratory in America that has safety regulations or anything, anyone there working would have told you that we don't just leave our super secret serum out in the open for you to take home and put it in your Frigidaire.
Yeah. I don't care what little piece of paper you put over your pocket as you steal them. People are counting that shit.
You don't work for a boss who 1 minute loves you and the next minute hates you, depending on how much money you can make for him. It's insane. And it really belittles you in a way, because after you've watched it, you can't unsee the stupidity. And now everybody that's a human in this movie looks like a cartoon character, and the cartoon characters are looking more and more like humans. The lack of observation alone from the characters in this movie are staggering. So I'm with you, Rob. This script really needed somebody to just read it through and go, this makes no sense for how this movie plays it out with its time. It is far too loose with its thinking and the characters and their motivations, which basically in a lot of ways there aren't any, and it undermines the entire purpose of the emotional impact of the story.
You could have skipped the whole like first 3 years.
Yeah.
And you could have jumped into like, we've got apes, given us a little bit of backstory, and get to the virus part. Because when the virus eventually comes into this movie, you're just like, oh, there's a virus now. You know, like there's so much prologue to this movie essentially to get us to like understand Caesar and James Franco. No, I could have got all of that in about 10 minutes.
Yeah, you know? It's a simple concept, and they've padded it to the point of ludicrousy. And now you have nothing to do but notice the ridiculous things that come on screen because you already know where we're going with it. So you're just paying super attention to what's happening, and what's happening on the screen is kind of ridiculous.
Well, you know what isn't ridiculous? Pointing out who our dirty ape of the episode is. And my dirty ape, and I gonna guess it's yours too, right? Mm-hmm. Should we say it at the count of 3?
Yes.
1, 2, 3.
Dodge.
Yep.
He's the worst.
He is Draco Malfoy as an ape handler.
Somewhere in Hollywood, there has to be some kind of union that requires your movie to have so many asshole teen workers in it. And this guy covers that quota for probably he could have covered the quota for all these movies and not been in the other movies. He's so terrible. It's
so over the top. Like, okay, Brian Cox hires his sons as his employees. No, you don't need to do that. There's no reason for that to be the case. I can get kind of like as a motivation to have a less than like empathetic character there. But there could be someone working in monkey prison that's just all business and not also a snot-nosed shitty kid. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. It is such a trope to have this guy in here. And him being cranked up to 11 is just another ridiculous, cartoonish element injected into this movie that wants you to take its themes seriously, and you can't. He brings his dates to primate prison to show off his job. No, because he hates his job. He thinks the whole thing's dumb. But
you know it's going to smell terrible.
You don't take your date to primate prison. You know, you just don't.
You heard it here first, everyone.
Yeah, that's going to be a t-shirt coming to Bill and Rob's merchshop.com when we get that up. And he's just terrible. And he's completely unlikable in every way. He has no redeeming qualities. If he had been somebody who had been hurt by these animals, or maybe somehow, maybe he worked for his dad and one of them got a hold of him at some time in the past, and that's why he's so angry about the way he is. But he's just terrible to everybody and everybody around him, and you feel no sympathy for him when his moment comes, and you feel cheated when he's the one who lets out the biggest callback of all in this movie. And if you watch this movie, dear friends, and you hear it, you'll know exactly what we're talking about.
And what I will say, Bill, is that what Caesar says after that actually took my breath away. And not like in a da-na-na-na-na, but in a like, oh, I was not actually expecting that in this movie.
Yeah.
I did not expect it. And I think they did it just enough.
Yeah. And it really shows to me, and I think to you, Rob, that the fact that this movie shook out the way it did to be able to allow Andy Serkis to be a human, to allow Andy Serkis to be a living being inhabiting this role, he makes Caesar come to life. And he pulls these things out of the fire as they go. He's a dominant personality. You are really invested in what he's doing, so that when these crazy moments come by, you're still going to want to know what happens next. So I give him all the credit in the world for that, because he really saves the watchability of this movie in a lot of ways.
Andy Serkis pulls the things out of the fire. Quest for Fire.
Ooh.
I think I've got a new Andy Serkis remake
Mm-hmm.
that needs to happen. But until then, we should move on to one of our last segments. Walk me through, Bill, how we're doing our patented rating / final thoughts / whatever segment here.
So for this segment, we're just going to call this one Taking Care of Monkey Business. And that's where we just sum up our thoughts on the movie, our final takes. And we let you folks know, is this the kind of movie that'll pack the house, or is it a madhouse of a movie? So Rob, why don't you go first? Give us your final thoughts on Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and what kind of rating will you give it as a movie?
Now, to be clear, am I rating it either madhouse or packed house?
Yeah, we're going to distill it down to just those 2 points. So
just those two monkey paw fingers.
A packed house, a great movie that everybody was just needs to rush and go see, or madhouse, where it's just one you should probably send you screaming into the forbidden zone after you've watched it.
Well, I think that using everything I've said leading up to this, the movie misses the mark, right? But it has the core of a good idea. It's a fucking Planet of the Apes movie. You know, it cannot, and I've said this time and time again, cannot be taken too serious. So when you go way in one direction to try and be super serious with a chimpanzee taking over the world movie, but then make silly mistakes along the way to reduce the credibility of how serious you want to take this movie, it is difficult to hit a bullseye. You just can't do it. You can't have it both ways, right? You can't have a ridiculous trope salad while also trying to have James Franco be a super serious scientist with the father of John Lithgow. Like, come on, people. But like I said, the story itself is a good, this is how the Planet of the Apes started, right? This is how we get our first intelligent ape / apes with a few trims here and there. I think there's a really great 45-minute to an hour and 10-minute made-for-TV movie here. Cut out some stuff and you could have a fun fan edit. Hey, maybe I'll make a fun fan edit of this. So for that, I'm going to say this one's a little bit more of a madhouse than a packed house. How about you, Bill?
I'm right there with you on this one, Robs. We've said this before, and you've just reiterated it. You can't serve two masters. If you're going to do a super sciencey take on why this thing happens with a big set piece at the end, you got to do that. Which means you got to get it right. You can't have this crazy, ridiculous decision making and glass labs that shatter and monkeys flying everywhere and James Franco just zipping around, making sure that his hair looks great while he makes terrible decisions as a human and as a quote unquote scientist. You just can't. It's farcical. Yeah. It's a complete farce. It's the kind of stuff that you start out with in a B movie. It's no good. If you want to lean into the apes part of it, you can do that too, but you don't need the whole first part of this movie. So I'm with you. I think there's a really good core element. I think if they had recast, like we'd said, put Lithgow and Cox at the beginning of this and give them a driving reason to invent the virus that causes this. Say Lithgow's got the Alzheimer's and he's working in his own best interests, and that leads to this thing happening, and you get rid of a bunch of these tertiary ridiculous nonsense characters. Yeah, this movie would have been a lot better. And as a 2001 summer blockbustery type movie, yeah, I see how this one definitely gets past the goalie, because if you're sitting in the theater with 3D glasses on, this thing can overwhelm your senses. And it's also a reason why I don't care for 3D movies. But this movie is definitely a madhouse. Once you sit and watch it, and you watch it for its story, especially now at home on the small screen where you're allowed to focus on things, the human element just doesn't make sense. And as we've mentioned in our previous series, please go back and listen to our Predator versus Alien episodes where we talked about the humans don't need to be there. In that sense, they don't serve a purpose, because we've seen what they can do after the first movie. We know where this is going. And these new ones don't really bring anything to the lore. It's just they're the characters that supposedly invent the thing that caused the downfall of humanity. And you can say that just like we did in a sentence. You got to give me more. So I'm glad I watched it. It is a fun movie to watch if you know that the ridiculousness is coming, and embrace it and have fun talking about it. It's not that bad in that sense, but for a story and as an Apes movie, it is definitely a madhouse of a movie.
Well, Bill, that brings us to the end of the first episode of a new season of Bill and Rob's An Excellent Adventure. Bill, is there anything you want people to, I don't know, if they're looking for extra material, something you'd want to plug, anything out there that either you're a part of or friends of yours are a part of, anything like while they wait for our next episode that you'd like to plug?
I would like to plug you, Rob's. Rob's has a bunch of great podcasts out there. You have Vanderpump Rob's, a Vanderpump Rules podcast with actually some wonderful insights, because you're friends with some people on that show. You're friends with Peter Madrigal, who is your co-host. So please go out and check out that. That's a great show. I've been on it. And you have a new show series that you're reviewing currently, are you not, Rob?
Well, at the time of this episode's recording, I am releasing episodes on another Bravo show called Winter House, which is in the Vanderpump Rob's feed, because two members of Vanderpump Rules have been side characters in this season of Winter House. The Toms show up. So
whoa,
it's been a great prequel to the new season of Vanderpump Rules, which will probably have just ended by the time this episode comes out. Boy, the drama is there, and you can go catch it all over the Vanderpump Rob's podcast, part of the Sonar Network. Now, Bill, we, of course, are part of the Bridge Burner Collective, and you took the plug right out of my mouth, so why don't we move right into our credits? And I think that, we go on this long tirade of people we want to thank, and that's always what we got to do. We got to thank Mrs. Columbo for prepping these episodes, listening to them, making sure we don't sound like complete fools. We got to thank Jothan for our show art. We got to thank Draxium and Dr. Z for our theme music. Bill, but the biggest thing people can do, you know this, is share the podcast with their friends and family into the old group text. Say, hey, you're going to go ape for this episode. Am I right?
You are. We want you to take your social media account and use it like those tubes of virus that Caesar throws at his friends and compatriots. Please spread the word about our show. That's what keeps us going. That's also what's going to allow us to expand and do more things, which we really want to do. Robs and I have many, many things that we would like to watch and talk about on here. And your support is what's going to make all that possible. So take our shows, please share our links, retweet our stuff from your social medias, or just talk about it with some friends, especially if you got friends like Planet of the Apes. Tell them to look us up. We're not hard to find. Bill and Rob's An Excellent Adventure, and let them check it out for ourselves. We thank all of you for it. So all of that helps us. That's the currency of podcasts, and it all comes down to you. Like we always say, we have friends, we don't have fans, and we appreciate all of our friends who share, support, and put our show out there into the world for others to find. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and if you want to get those direct links, you can find them in our show notes. The description of this episode has everything you need to not only share this episode, leave a voicemail, or support. Everything is helpful in the eyes of these two apes doing this podcast. Bill, I'm really looking forward to next week's episode, which I believe is Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Mm-hmm.
So until then, I'll see you later, man.
All right. See you later, Robs.